I got a question. Craig, why do you look like you're 12? I don't understand that. What are you eating?
Dude,
I
want the drink. I need the drink, brother.
I'll kill you.
We
That
are
might be the
recording.
awkward question.
Okay,
yes.
I just started recording. So the question is, why do I look like I'm 12?
Why do you look so young? Your voice is kind of like a middle-aged white man.
Wait, Icky. Don't try to fix it. Yo, don't try to say why you look so young. No. You said, Craig. No, you said, quick question. Craig.
Yeah, quick question.
Craig, why do you look like you're 12?
Right. That was going to be my first question last week, actually.
Really?
Well,
Yeah.
the problem is when you start preaching on same-sex marriage and you look like you're 12, a lot of people come up and say like, you'll grow out of it. And you're like, wait, what? That's not what this was about. So there is some disadvantages to it when you're trying to push people forward. Like they're constantly thinking, how old is this guy and why is he trying to push me this way?
Dang. Yeah.
But other than that, I have always looked young for my age, and I have a feeling that one night it will all of a sudden be gone, and I'll wake up looking like I'm 10 years older than I actually am. So,
dang. Well, dude, we need to know what you're drinking, what you're sipping, what pro vitamins.
You got a grown man voice. Like your voice sounds like a middle-aged white man. Like I feel like I'm gonna talk to you, and then I see you and I'm like, why do you
is that a compliment? What is that? What is that? I don't even know how to classify that. You know what? You look like you're 12, but you sound like a middle-aged white man.
I'm just made for radio. That's all I can say.
Yeah, dude. No, it's great. But hey, dude, that voice must be calming and soothing because people are listening to it on the regular.
There you go.
Yo,
You know?
my man's got things to say.
You gotta say what you gotta say. You just gotta live life, man. And we Mandy's on here, don't think differently of us
I forgot
because
Mandy was on here.
oh, see, that's the problem with the patriarchy. Always forgetting about the women.
So rude.
Yeah.
The patriarchy. I feel like I'm gonna say that phrase a lot today. The patriarchy.
If we do this right, I would say
We gotta call it
that's
out.
the
You're right, man.
buzzword.
That's a buzzword, right?
Yep.
Good. That's the patriarchy. Yeah, Mandy, feel free to check us at every step of the way until you get tired of it.
Thank you. I
You're
appreciate
gonna be like, this is what all the colored people feel like, man. Dang, every second
Everything
you gotta
that comes
come
out of their mouth is inappropriate.
They don't know.
I'm
They know nothing.
I'm not unfamiliar with that because working at the VA, I'm working with veterans from Vietnam War and that area, and the patriarchy was reigning hard.
The patriarchy was raining. Is that like a phrase you say like when you come home from work? You're like, hey, Joe, I'm home, and he's like, how was your day, Mandy? She's like, oh, the patriarchy was raining hard.
The patriarchy was strong today.
Oh my goodness.
That patriarch game was on point today.
Dude, I almost had to
I'm
slap
gonna add it to
somebody.
the vernacular.
No, Mandy wouldn't slap anybody. She's a pastor. They don't do that.
I'll slap him with my words.
Ooh.
I feel like Mandy might, dude. Like
She's got a
last time we were
strong
together,
verbal
she was like,
backhand.
She was like leading the program. I was like afraid, man. I was like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Man. Just don't look at me like that, Mandy, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Don't be sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, the matriarchy is strong in you. That's fine.
Yes.
The matriarchy. Who even came up with those terms? That was probably the patriarchy as well. Sure, women would have a better title for themselves. This is gonna be tough. Thank you, Mandy, for being here, and keeping ourselves in check.
Happy to do so.
Yeah. Woo! All right. Well, let's get this thing started. I think there's probably some good in there. There's something weird. It usually is Icky that brings it out, but we'll see. I guess we'll see when we do the playback. We'll see who made the cut.
I think we got this, guys. We're ready to go.
All
Let's
right.
go. We got Young Craig, and we got Mandy Girl, and we got
Mandy Girl.
and,
The patriarchy
and
is
then
strong
The
with this one.
patriarchy.
the ambiguously racial guy. Let's do this.
That was it. That was it. I told you. It's always Icky. Ambiguously racial guy. When we're talking about gender, he can't even get the offense correct. Welcome to the Urban Prophets Podcast. We are back.
Welcome.
We are back, and we have more friends today, man. If y'all listen to the last one, hey, by the way, just a side note, I'm telling you, when you get a message that rains with the people, it's good. I played the preview on my Instagram, and that was like definitely one of the highest playbacks just for the preview part. It was like about 250 something, just off the rip. And most things that I do,
listening,
you know,
everybody.
it's good. So I hope you guys are going out and listening to the full thing, because that's just a small tidbit of the
Smidget.
big smorgasbord of deliciosity that comes. All right, so we're back again, and we're doing more. This is our part 2 of our Make a Statement series. Oh, it has been good. Oh, it has been good. You got to go back and listen to the first of this series. We talked about the affirmation of the LGBTQIA community, and so you got to go back and listen to that one if you haven't. The next one we have coming up after this is anti-racism. We'll be diving into that world. But today,
Hey.
brothers and
Today.
sisters, siblings of the earth, as
Yo.
our Paradox people have helped us with this phrasing, we are celebrating women. Yeah, let's get that. Let's go. And of course, we have with us, as last week we did,
Again.
Pastor Craig Hadley,
Bishop Reverend.
Elder Bishop Reverend Hadley of the Paradox Church in Redlands, California. If you're down there, you got to check them out. And if you can't get down there, they are on Facebook and Paradox. What's the website? Dot what?
ParadoxRedlands.com.
ParadoxRedlands.com. But today we have a super firepower. As well, we have the associate pastor of the ParadoxRedlands.com church world community everything. If you all watched my Instagram check-in chat, I've actually had both of these dynamic folks on, but I had on first Pastor Mandy Cordero. Let's give her a round of applause. I should just get the real horns instead of making that sound. I'll just put it in
We
later.
can't afford it until more of you guys sponsor
Yeah,
us, so
sponsor us so we can
Come on,
get that DJ horn
otherwise
and
it'll just be our
explosions.
mouths.
Yeah, and that's always getting us in trouble. Man, welcome, pastors. Welcome.
Oh,
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh yeah, no, we are ready. We are ready to get into this topic, man. It's a super good one. Celebrating women in the church and ministry. As always, we're gonna have questions. We're gonna have great conversation. But I would like to begin. Let's do the same format like we did last time. Let's read the statement, get it into everybody's psyche. Digest it, and then we'll get into the backstory and questions and all that good stuff. Who has it today? Mandy, do you happen to you have the okay, correct, okay, all right. Let's hear that, and then we get right into it.
So just a little quick background. A year after we wrote the LGBTQIA affirmation and celebration statement, this statement for women's celebration and empowerment came out. So that was August 2019. And our guest speaker that day was a guest speaker named Mandy Cordero, who would join our staff just a few months after that. So This is
Wow.
from,
Okay. Oh, that's cool. Oh, yeah. Let's get into that. Okay. Good.
yeah, this
We'll
is
do
from
that.
the
We'll do
elders
that.
of the
Yeah.
church, who are the elected people to oversee the spiritual health of our church. And the statement reads, as the elders of Paradox, we are charged to cultivate the spiritual life of our church. This responsibility compels us to make a statement of full celebration and affirmation for women everywhere. We came to this conclusion after more than 3 years of extended study in the Holy Bible, sustained prayer asking for God's guidance, and growing in relationship as a church body. Therefore, may everyone who comes into contact with us know that we here at Paradox worship a divine being who embodies characteristics of all genders, and we equally celebrate feminine, masculine, and gender-neutral images and metaphors for God. We live with the conviction that women are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of Christ. We recognize that the feminine perspective is necessary for understanding the Holy Bible. We ordain female pastors with equal spiritual authority and promote women at all levels of church leadership. We advocate for every woman's right to make choices about her body, including clothing, healthcare, abortion, sexuality, and well-being. We believe survivors of sexual harassment and assault and commit to making Paradox a safe space for all. We appreciate all identities and gender expressions within womanhood, including trans women and all variations of gender for those who identify as a woman. We celebrate the diversity of femininity, the positivity of all body shapes and sizes, and every woman's individuality, including her role in the body of Christ and the greater community. We say and commit to all of these things in order to bring glory and honor to God, to love others as we love ourselves, and to love God with all of our heart, mind, and soul. Sincerely, the elders of Paradox Church.
Was there, so last week when we were talking about after you all read the statement, there was a nice solemn moment, tears, hugs, things like that. I didn't get to look at this video. I don't know if you have the video of this on the website as well. Mm-hmm. What was the vibe in the room after the statement was read?
Well, I'll answer that question first, then I'll throw it to Mandy, because Mandy was our speaker for that day, so she can answer from her perspective as well. The thing that's hard to remember, because 2019 feels like it was 3 decades ago, is that there was a bunch of legislation that had just been passed nationally about women's bodies, primarily abortion bills being passed at alarmingly rapid rates in southern states as well as other parts of the United States. And it was just like this constant assault of taking away birth control options, of denigrating female leaders, of just all sorts of questions. Democratic nominees were coming forward, and there was questions about whether or not we were ready for another female person to run for presidency. So it was a really, really tense time with gender issues in 2019. And we actually were talking about, we knew the next 2 statements we wanted to make were about women's celebration and affirmation and anti-racism. And given where the country was at a year ago, we chose to do the women's statement first. That was the elders' decision, just because there was so much anti-women legislation that was being passed. So there was like this sense that we told everybody we were going to do this, and everyone just assumed it would be about women's ordination. And we did the same thing with the board, which is the elders commissioned a group of women to come together and write this statement. The difference between this statement and the last one was I wasn't part of this. So it was actually all lay people that came up with this statement. Now, they would ask me for feedback every now and then, but it was all driven by women from our church, and they talked about what they wanted this statement to be. And when you consider that, I'm really impressed with what what came out of this group because I just really think it's a statement that I'm really proud to be part of. And when it was read, there was this moment where it was just like, it was a little bit different because it was almost like this awareness of, wow, we needed this and we didn't know how much we needed it, both for men and women in the congregation. And I think that it kind of raised people's expectations or it blew past people's expectations because they all kind of felt like, okay, we support women. And then we got to that and it's like, oh, there are so many more things that we could be doing. And we had like an all-female band that day. We've done that a couple times since then. We had only women on platform. We're continuing to strive to do that. We can do better in some regards. But it was really, I thought it was a very meaningful service on many levels for many different reasons, but it kind of snuck up on us more than the LGBTQIA statement.
And Mandy, when you spoke on that particular Sabbath, did you get the sense that this might be a place where you wanted to be? Did you know that before then, or when did it land on your spirit?
Well, I was in the middle of a transition. I was transitioning from working at an Adventist church to working on my CPE units and working as a chaplain resident at the VA. So I was in this major phase of transition at that point. And I just had this very kind of gut feeling that as I was leaving the church that I was working at, that was going to be the last time I worked for an Adventist church. I can't tell you why I felt it. I just knew that I felt it. I had considered Paradox a spiritual home for some time. And so when they asked me to speak, that was something that was very exciting. I was like, yes, absolutely. And then they handed over the statement so that I would know what I was preaching on and what I was preaching to and kind of the heart of what this day was supposed to encompass. And as I was reading the statement, I was sitting on my couch at home and I remember getting up and running to the kitchen where Joe was cooking and being like, Joe, like they did a thing. Like it's not just a minimal like, oh, right. Women are great. Like it's a full blown, like not every aspect of womanhood, but a lot of what women carry on their shoulders, what a lot of the weight and a lot of the pressure from society that we carry, like is addressed in here. We have the divine image. We have autonomy. We should be able to make choices about our bodies. I am an equally competent spiritual leader as my male counterparts. Like we come in all shapes and sizes and interests. Like it felt so freeing. And so when I was asked to preach, I read the statement, it was almost like okay, cool. Like we're gonna do this. If I'm gonna preach and I gotta stay true to the heart of what this is, and I have to go all the way. Like it's not like halving it, it's going all the way. And so it was, as I was preaching it, remember thinking, I can't believe I'm up here saying these things in church and I'm getting like positive responses from the congregation. It was a hugely liberating experience. And then afterwards, it was almost equally touching. I just sensed that there was this huge sense of relief almost. I don't know if that's quite the right word, but this just like this sigh of just like, all is good. And there was this beautiful moment where all of the women participants, the band, the people who had come up and I'm an English major, I should know this. The women who would come up and, what is that word? Speak?
Women who came,
I'm sorry.
They came up to speak?
They came up to speak. Thank you. Wow. Look at that blackout that just happened.
That's right, man. All that excitement.
I know. There was this beautiful moment where all of us just naturally gravitated to each other and just had this very beautiful, intimate hug. Like all 7, 8, 9 of us, somewhere around there, and just cried and hugged each other. And it was just a very bonding, beautiful thing. And the response of the church was was beautiful. It was the first time that I was like, okay, maybe I can leave an Adventist church and find a home beyond the borders of that.
That is, to me, that is amazing. And at the same time, and I'm speaking specifically to your last statement of maybe I could find a home beyond these, certain parameters. It's amazing, and at the same time, it highlights something I feel like the church really needs to work on. This kind of exclusive, this is the way, walk ye in it, and other than this way, you are going to be basically frowned upon, as if God is not anywhere else in this world that God has created. So I'm really, just hearing that, this is kind of the second time, that I'm hearing about that journey of stepping out from one specific tradition and expanding your, journey. And it's freeing, man. I love it. I love it, man. It's great.
So for you guys, was there no rubrics before you created this? Like, was this out of prayer? Obviously it comes from experience and whatnot, but it wasn't connected to or associated to another church or another denomination, but more so from the experience of the text.
Yeah, so we all come out of different traditions. I mean, the majority of our church probably still identifies as Seventh-day Adventist, and we don't discourage them from that.
I've heard of those people.
What was that?
I've heard of those people.
Yeah. So, so they still identify as Seventh-day Adventists, but we have people who grew up in the Baptist church. We have several people who grew up in the Catholic church, which I don't know if you know this, they don't ordain women. And we've had, we have a lot of people who have different kind of experiences growing up with particularly ordination of women and female leadership in the church. So everybody kind of has that. And when that group of women came together, they all brought their different experiences. I actually went under, when I was still working for the denomination, I was placed under a theological review. And that review began the day after the General Conference voted no on women's ordination. So it was like this really tough 1-2 punch for me. And I remember after the General Conference voted no, I walked outside. I was at a restaurant here, and next to the restaurant was a bar. And on the bar window, it said, absolutely no sexism, homophobia, or racism allowed in these doors. And I remember looking at that sign at the bar and thinking, that would be controversial to put up at our church, the church that I was working at before. And we'd have to have a committee meeting and see if that was okay. And here's a bar who seems to be living that better than what our church was at that time. And it was a really kind of strange moment to go through that. And so there was this sense that we have to state this and be very upfront about it. But then it started getting bigger. It's like, okay, how are all the ways that women are discriminated against or excluded from church ministry, and how are they excluded from levels of leadership? And I think that one thing that I really took in and can experience and testify to is it's important for every church in America to have spaces where women and women alone get to make decisions. It doesn't have to be every decision. Obviously, there's a lot of co-ed decisions that need to be made. But there have to be times when men get out of the room and women make decisions about the church, because that will not naturally happen. You have to intentionally do it for the health of the church. And it's got to be decisions that matter. And so we've tried to do that.
Right, not like the color of the drapes or...
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's some patriarchy thinking right there.
Make some choices.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Even the concept of we let them is already a problematic,
but
right?
But I think every marginalized group has heard that phrase, right? Even when we talk about whatever, youth ministry, young adult ministry, or ministry towards minorities, we give them a platform or we give them space.
Man, let's I want to spend some time in the committee that was formed. I didn't realize that Mandy, you didn't work there yet. So you weren't a part of that whole process then.
I got the final product.
Yeah. Okay, because I had a couple of questions that I thought you might be able to give us insight into, but you weren't there yet. So we'll come at it from a different angle. But I want to commend your church. Shout out to everybody who was on the committee. I haven't met you yet, but I'm giving you a virtual. No, the elders didn't make the statement. It was a different committee, right?
So it came from the subcommittee of women. A lot of the women were serving as elders. They invited other women as well. And they came up with the statement, but it's a group commissioned by the elder board. Okay,
commissioned by the elder board. Does that mean that that was like an invitation to be a part of this committee, or
yeah,
what does
and
commission
actually this
mean
one,
in this
we
sense?
opened it wide and we said anyone who identifies as a female in our church is welcome to be on this board or this subcommittee. So we invited some people personally, and then we also opened this one up.
Nice. So here's my commendation, and it's going to lead to the question. Commendation is to the board or to the constructed final committee for their work and their insight of saying we need no men to be a part of this. Commendation to them, and commendation to you, Pastor Craig, for seeing that there was great wisdom in that. And the reason I say that is it's not like a man thing. This is like you are the lead spiritual person responsible for that faith community, and having that trust and recognizing the importance of of withdrawing yourself from the committee, or agreeing to the notion that it would be better for you not to be a part of the committee. That to me, I think is a good move in terms of solidarity.
I need to be honest, Donovan. I need to be honest. I'm sorry. I appreciate that very much, but I've got to be honest. One of the greatest enemies in my life is my own ego. And it was not easy for me to hear that request. And I'm telling you that because I think that men need to own either ways they contribute to sexism or ways they participate in the patriarchy. And we've got to make that okay to own that and share that and talk honestly about it. So they told me they wanted to do that, and I was on the outside. I was like, okay, and on the inside, I was hurt. I was hurt.
Right.
It was absolutely the right call. But there's my ego that's convinced that I know what women want more than they do, which is sexism to a core. And it was a great experience for me to be able to step out, be like, all right, let's see what they come up with. And it's better than anything I can expect. And it reminds me, Craig, you have so much more to learn and so much further to go. So I appreciate the condemnation, but I feel like in good faith, I have to stand before you and say, it wasn't easy for me. I wish it was.
I would like to say, though, that the amount of men who could hear something like that and be hurt inside and then say, oh, okay, and walk away anyway is painfully small.
That's where I'm coming from.
Absolutely.
I'm with you, Mandy.
That's a huge growing experience.
I just speaking of my experience of men who claim that they are allies, and then I'm like, hey, you did this thing that crossed a boundary or it hurt, and here's why, and their response is one of anger and defensiveness rather than I'm going to receive that and listen to you. That's the normal response. Not normal, but that is the typical response I receive. So the fact that you didn't respond in that way, I think it speaks highly of allyship.
Oh, allyship, yes. You said it well.
It might be a sense of male privilege, huh?
Well,
I'm coming. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it is that, and it's also pastoral privilege. I mean, spiritual arrogance.
Yeah.
I think every pastor I know struggles with. We're always tempted to spiritual arrogance. And as much as people in the church are tempted to spiritual arrogance, it's very rare. In fact, I can count on one hand the amount of times that congregants have come to my office for counseling in spiritual arrogance. We all know pride is a sin, but very few of us want to admit that we struggle with it. And so when it comes to these things and people bringing up these ideas, it's amazing how I consider myself very much pro-women and pro-ordination. And then it came to this thing where lay people said to me, hey, we think we can do this without you. And my response was, I don't know if you can. And then I was like, no, Craig, that's your ego talking. That's sexism. You have to own it and step away. And I just, if other men feel that, I want you to know it is okay to feel that. You also need to recognize how you are trusting women to make decisions, because when we allow that feeling to override who we are, that's where we start to get into the discussion of toxic masculinity.
And I feel like that's a really important part, right? Is like being able to name when you are feeling defensive. And if you're not able to recognize and name it, then you're not actually able to act.
Deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So so Mike, so the question is, and I guess Craig, you're kind of getting into it, is what are your thoughts about that? Mandy, when did you first know that was the situation? From when you got the statement, did you know any of that backstory about them, about the committee saying, okay, Pastor, we're going to do this without you and all of that, or?
I think I actually did. I don't know when I knew it. I just remember being told it was written by all women. I don't remember when Craig told me that he had been asked to leave. I just remember that I knew.
What are your thoughts on that? Like when you first heard it, were you like, whoa, huh? Or were you like, yeah, that makes sense?
No, I was like, get it, girls. That's really what it was. Like, yes, own your space.
Own this thing, yeah.
Yeah,
good.
Own it. I love that. Like, I feel like because women are so often taught to just accept the presence of men in spaces that make them uncomfortable. We're told and taught, in order to make it as a woman in this world, you just kind of got to put up with stuff. And that's one of those things. And so the fact that there's this group of women who together said, this isn't the space for you, and they stood strong in that, I think speaks of, number one, empowerment of women for each other, and number two, a finding of courage and ownership of space that has before now not really been offered to women, and this is them taking that space back.
That is such a word, because a lot of us guys inoculate ourselves with the idea that we're an exception. Like, we're feminists. Come on, we can come into this space and help you guys along. And to hear that, no, actually, we don't need you here right now.
Actually, please leave.
To be empowered to say that. Yeah, like, get out. If you really do want to help us, get out. Like, ouch, okay.
Yikes.
All right, my ladies, fine. But it's good. No, that's powerful.
And they were much nicer about it than that
in your church. Were they?
Yeah, they were much nicer about it. It wasn't like, get out now. It was, Craig, we think that we can do this with all women in the room. And so they were very nice about it. I don't want to be like they were man haters or anything like that. I didn't get any of that impression.
Craig, you patriarchy pig,
exactly,
get out of here.
Exactly. None of that.
No patriarchy.
Probably all stuff I deserved.
Oh, no, that's good. No, it's a great dynamic. Go ahead, Iggy. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because you've got a strong statement, how do you guys enact that in your church? How does it come to fruition? What does it look like tangibly? And how do you stay on top of it to make sure? Because, like, once we create statements, they tend to kind of lull into, that's the dogma of our church. So how do you guys stay on top of making this thing enacted? in your congregation?
Well, I'd like to jump in first on that question because it will lead into how Mandy answers that question, and she may not know that yet, but it will make sense in a second.
Of course,
Perfect.
the patriarchy wants to start.
Well, I knew I was setting myself up for that. So, you know those sermons that you sit in and you're like, I can't believe I got to hear this in person? That was the kind of sermon that Mandy gave at our church in August last year. I mean, it's one of the top 10 sermons I've heard in my life in person. And she just blew the roof off the place.
Dang, big word.
Well,
big word.
I backed it up because we hired her. So you can see that.
That's true.
And I really mean that. And, I don't know if it translates as well in the video. There's something about being in that room that's sometimes hard to replicate on video. But I will tell you that was one of the best sermons I've heard. It blew the roof off the place. And as soon as she was done speaking, I think I had 10 different church members, which is about, 10% of our church, rush up to me and they said, "What are we doing to hire her?" And
wow.
I mean, that's an important point. It's hard for us to live this statement without a female pastor on staff. And, the statement isn't where we're at, it's where we're hoping to go. And Mandy has brought a real dynamic to our church and to our team in a real meaningful way. And she's helped us to live that not just in her areas that she was hired, but just in the church in general. But she's much more than her gender as well, where she's got the way that she presents and she pastors has really spoken for itself. And while that may not be like certain boxes you tick off or whatever, it's ultimately the fact that she does the job well is the ultimate testament to that. We are also answering that we are rereading the statements now on an annual basis and evaluating to make sure they still recognize how we feel. And also to evaluate and hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're living up to that. So that's actually starting for the first time in 2021, and we're hoping to do that. But I think that Mandy's brought a lot of that to the table, as well as what she's seen with the ministry that she's done. And so at this time, I'll hand it over to her.
Awesome. One of the things that I've loved about Paradox is I have not had to hide any sort of or any aspect of the feminine experience in any way, shape, or form. And that my first speaking gig, I guess you can say, was actually a Friday night. I want to say a week after I was hired. Is that right, Craig? A week?
When you were hired by us, yes. It wasn't a speaking thing, though. It was a Q&A.
It was a Q&A. Okay, but this was like high stakes Q&A. It was a Paradox. It was Paradox After Dark is what we called it. And basically what they got to do is they got to ask any questions about sexuality.
Nice.
High stakes.
And high stakes, I'm telling you. It is high stakes. And so I was like, if they're really gonna be about women and really gonna be about open conversation and having these dialogues, then I'm gonna lean in and just see. And I mean, when I say I leaned in, I said all the things. I did not hold back. I mean, I was an advocate for female masturbation, but I talked about how it was important for women to know our bodies because our bodies are more complicated. We lamented birth control. It was just I can't ever in my life think of a moment where I have seen a woman pastor, a woman minister, talk about sexuality in such a raw way. And that was it was such a liberating moment to be like, we're leaning in, we're going for it. And what was so encouraging was the congregation was so receptive. It was just, thank gosh, finally, we get the women's perspective on this. And that was pretty cool. So that after that, it was almost like very permission giving. I feel like as working with the children and working with youth, it's been something that has been on the forefront of my mind as we explore stories. I was very anxious and intentional with exploring stories that have all sorts of different people. Women are included in that, and not only just women, but women of color, queer women, lots of things like that. And so it's an aspect that I try to bring to our children's and youth ministry pretty heavily, is we're not typecasting women as one sort of women. We're gonna hear stories from all walks of life. And so that's a really important thing in children's and youth ministry that I've found really valuable.
Oh, that is awesome, man. I want to get into some of these points that were made in the statement, and I'd like to hear you all's thoughts on them. One of the first things that I thought of is this concept of how we use biblical metaphors. And I wanted you guys, if you could, to talk about that. What have you seen as some problematic metaphors? Because we always want to give, people listening, it's like, oh, you know what? I have never even put up the question when I've heard X and X metaphor used before. But we want to start heightening those senses as well. So if there are any, that you can think of that are some metaphors that may have been problematic, or how that kind of, came to be one of the thoughts, and what are some better approaches to how we can speak about God? And whoever can jump in first.
Great question, Manny. Why don't you jump in first on that one?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm not necessarily thinking of problematic metaphors. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily, I don't know if I can necessarily think of anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what is problematic, just to clarify, like metaphors, like when we talk about God, our language is so limited to the size of the divine that metaphors is the only tool that we have to talk about God. And then God's relationship to this world, to humanity. And so I don't know if I can think of a problematic metaphor so much as I can think of the problematic way in which we use metaphors. So when we are only using masculine metaphors for God, I would argue that's problematic. It's not the metaphors themselves, it's the fact that we are only using masculine metaphors. It erases the feminine aspects of God. And so I think when we are using metaphors, we need to be intentional to make sure that we're including metaphors that aren't just masculine, but are gender neutral as well as feminine. And I think that's incredibly important. I can think of a couple of moments throughout my life and through my ministry where I've encountered people who have just been hell-bent that God is a man, that to call God mother is an insult. And then you have to ask the question, wow, what is it about the metaphor mother that is so much more inferior to father, and what does that say about your understanding of women and motherhood, and how does that shape your theology? Because it says a lot more about the person when they take issue with a God who's characterized as mother, who is characterized as woman, who is characterized in any sort of feminine way. If you have a problem with that, that says a lot about your understanding of women.
Yeah.
And I would say a problematic metaphor. Oh, go ahead, Iki.
No. I was just agreeing along. Yeah.
I would say a problematic metaphor is actually father. And I know that because when we sing "This is my father's world" here at Paradox, we changed the wording to "This is my mother's world," primarily because of the statement. And people have a reaction to that. And it's interesting that reaction, I believe, is completely rooted in the fact that we've forgotten that father is a metaphor and not actual truth. And when we are uncomfortable with changing the metaphor, saying, God is like a mother, or God is mother, and people are like, oh, this sounds like new agey spiritual stuff. It actually shows that we have taken the metaphor of God being a father and turned it into an idol. And that's where I think it's really important to break male-dominated metaphors for the church. And you can see it whenever you start to refer to God as she, or you start to refer to God as a female, and people become uncomfortable. it shows
Start
that
squirming.
the metaphor has started to push past what a metaphor can be, and we've forgotten it, and we've turned it into an idol that we can't break. One other thing that we've done is when I read scripture, when the Bible refers to God as He, I put in parentheses God as a placeholder, not to change the text because I'm not into that, but to let my congregation know that this is where they used a male metaphor to describe God, but to help them stay away from the idea that of the idolatry of God, that God is ultimately male. And so we put it in parentheses so when we put it on the screen, people can see where it says God, and it's a placeholder to remind people that's not the original text. But it's all designed to help break our addiction to male metaphors for God.
There's an incredible YouTube channel. It's called Hi Ho Kids. I don't know if you have
Hi Ho what?
Heard of it
Hi Ho Kid?
Hi Ho Kids.
Okay.
It's awesome. I mean, they do all sorts of things. If you've seen the videos where it's like kids taste food from Japan, this is this channel. But they have a really cool one where they get to meet with an illustrator and the kids describe to an illustrator something, and this illustrator draws it from them. There's this really, really good episode in which the kids describe God to they describe God to this illustrator, and there's this moment where two of the kids are asked, is God a man? Is God a woman? Is God nothing? And one of the boys is like, oh, let's make God a woman. And his twin sister is like, ooh, you're going to hell. And it's just like and it's that kind of thing is taught so early. And that's something that I've been having really fun. I actually just had this conversation with our Paradox kids. Like, how would you describe God? And these are young kids, and their answer is an old wise man. That was the majority of their answers. And it's like, wow, did you know that God is so much more than that? God is female. God is male. God is all of it and none of it. God is Asian and Hispanic and black and white and also none of it, and it's just this kind of just expanding of God, because when we limit God to male or man, we have limited God. And I feel that's problematic. Yeah.
So that really helps me process too, because I've seen it. I see it from your perspective, Mandy, where you're saying, metaphors are metaphors, and the problem is how we're using them. And then I couple that with Craig's point of saying people are getting past the fact that this is a metaphor, not anything more than that, right? It's a way to try and understand God, but this is by no means to the point where it's like a holy, sacred, like thing that is immovable or set in stone or whatnot like that. We've definitely, these are paradigm shifts that I feel we as Christians have to stretch our minds to think about, man. I'm loving that. Now, you guys said in there, you all said in there, let me stop using my you guys.
I should have called you out on that.
I know, man. Call it. You gotta be on your game. That's
I
right.
know. Craig can tell you. I have been. That's my go-to phrase for all-encompassing everyone. And so even last night we had a meeting, and I think I said "you guys" like 4 or 5 times, and I had to catch myself every time.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all,
you people.
Yeah.
My wife gets on me because I talk like that, and I don't know if you guys, if you hear like online. A lot of times where people are just calling everybody bruh, like it doesn't matter if they're guys or girls, they're just saying bro, whatever, so I talk like that naturally, and my wife had to tell me, she's like, I am not a dude, stop calling me dude, your daughters are not man, stop calling them man, because I'll be like, man, get up man, go do that. She's like, they are not man, stop. I'm like, all right, yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. So
I'm the one person you can call man, because that's a legitimate.
Yeah. Wait, no, you know what? Oh, I was going to ask you this question. We're going to get back to my question, but no, I wanted to ask you this. Has anybody ever called you that as a nickname? Because you are one person that can literally be called "What's up, man?" Like, and it.
Yes.
You
the
have.
answer is yes. And I have no
I'm
problem
pleased
with
to hear
it
that.
because I think I've been called man most of my life, like some sort of version, because it's just shorter than Mandy, and so
Yeah.
man works, and I hear it as half of Mandy rather than a man. So
Got you.
in
So
my mind,
so we can't call you that. Do you like that or not?
Yeah. I
Okay,
like all
okay.
All
right, cool,
I was gonna say all nicknames. I like that nickname, and you call me Manders as well. So
Yeah,
that's
I've definitely. I call everybody something ers. If I was around Craig a lot long enough, I'd be calling him Craigers, and he'd probably be like, "Dude, let's find another one." Yeah. So okay, let me get to the question here. So you all had said something about fully and wonderfully made. Was that just an affirmative statement, or had anyone in the group actually felt less than that, like not considered to be fully and wonderfully made?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Mandy. There are texts that are in the Bible that are sexist, and we have to own that up front. There's a lot of prophets. All the prophets are men in the section of the prophets of the Bible, and they often devalue women based on their sexual history. When they talk about a woman who is promiscuous, they call her a whore. It's obviously a very derogatory term, and it offers this warped view that the patriarchy values a woman based on the number of partners she's had. And that's not affirming what's in Psalm 139, which is, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And we find a lot more truth in that than the sexist metaphors or the sexist writings of the Bible. And I know it makes some people uncomfortable when we talk about the sexism that's in the scripture, but we have to be able to recognize the sexism in our scripture to recognize sexism today. And if we can recognize it in our holy writings, then we'll be able to recognize it around us and do something about it. Because the goal for us is not biblical propaganda. The goal is to be more loving of both God and of each other. And that requires that we own how sexist the Bible can be. Ezekiel 16 is one of the worst chapters toward women. I mean, just talks about how God views Israel as this promiscuous woman. Keep bringing back. And that's a metaphor that shows up throughout the prophets. And even like the story, one of the most well-known stories in the Bible is Hosea and Gomer. And the way the church tells it is not what's actually in the Bible. Because the way the church tells it is that God went to Hosea and said, I want you to marry a prostitute, and no matter how many times she runs away from you and sleeps around, you need to go get her and remarry her, because that's how I feel toward Israel. That's an awfully sexist story that isn't in the Bible. The real story is that Gomer loves somebody else, but she's poor. And Hosea loves Gomer, but Gomer does not love him back. So Hosea goes and buys her, and she keeps running away to her lover. And he's so infuriated that she wouldn't love him back, so he keeps trying to buy her back. And it's really a story about how you cannot buy the heart. And it is transformed and warped by the patriarchy. This is what happens when you have only male preachers who read Hosea and tell you the story about how, Gomer just couldn't keep her hands to herself. She just always had to seek, the life of the streets. And it's like, that's not in there at all. And it's not a surprise that Hosea
does not say
calls her a whore.
Hosea. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that it doesn't say anything like that, but the way the patriarchy and male preachers have told this story is very sexist in its interpretation, even though that part of the text I think is quite interesting when you look from it from the perspective of Gomer.
Dude, you know what I've heard about that?
Follow up.
No, go ahead, follow up.
I just wanted to follow up a quick question. Have you had to sit down and hold a conversation with individuals before who sees the text as immutable, and how do you deal with that kind of convo when you approach something like sexism in the Bible? How do you talk with them about that?
Well, I let them read it. Because it's really hard to argue that Ezekiel 16 isn't sexist. I mean, when you have women being declared unclean because of their periods, that's sexism. I mean, there's no other way to say it. The poet Naira Wahid, she writes a poem that says, "Every month I bleed but do not die. How am I not magic?"
Oh, it's my favorite poem.
And
I love that one.
like, why isn't that what Christianity does? Is give like blessing to the way the body works. But instead we look at the male-dominated pulpit. We'll look at women's bodies as unclean because of cycles or other things that happen. I mean, pregnancy pains are viewed as a curse from God in Genesis 3. I mean, it's a big deal. And when you think about it from there, you let the text be sexist and speak for itself. And then from there, I try to piece it back together and talk about how there's a different rubric for understanding the Bible. And we have so many sexist passages because of the 66 books of the Bible. Only one for sure, in my opinion, is written by a woman. 2 most likely, and there's a chance that 3 are written by women.
Have you had much success in those conversations?
I would say so. It's not like they come in or raging sexist and leave like girl power. It's a very gradual thing, right? But my attitude is, if they're here, they're wanting to learn, and I'm always going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they have good intentions with being here, and I just start to walk them through what it is that I see. And I would say that most people leave questioning what they have, and sometimes they come back and they say, I thought about it and I really just believe what I believed before. And at that point you have to say, okay, I tried, And other times they come back and they say, it's really changed the way that I've seen things. And it's not an overnight transformation. It's usually a gradual one. And I would say that over the sustained course of years, I've seen some real transformation with members in our congregation who would have vehemently disagreed with what I just said, and now I think would support it and say, I believe that too. But we're talking years, 4 years as a church together of saying this stuff.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff, I mean, discipleship, mentorship, that's a lifetime job. That's a ministry that takes time.
Yeah.
And individuals need to hear it from many different voices and different places before they begin to really understand and grasp certain ideas.
Yeah.
I've been working with Donovan for decades. This guy is finally coming around now.
Hey, no, you know what? No.
Man,
hey, you know what? No. Let me tell you something real. Let me tell you guys, Mandy, as a writer, as a we're you and I we do the writing. We're in the narrative world and all of that. Let me tell you, Icky actually was very kind to me because the play, do you remember, Mandy, the play that we did at first service in the beginning?
The Genesis one?
Yes. So my first crack at that play, I had the most sexist God when he was handing down that curse at the end.
Oh no!
And Icky was actually seriously working with me to try to, without condemning me, because he's like, okay, I know this dude just put all these hours into this play. I'm not trying to just, shock down his play, but let's try to get the messaging better. And later on, after, many Craigs coming to me, and me getting educated, I had to go back to him and be like, Icky, why in the world would you let me put out that play? That was heresy. That was just trash, bro. So I can attest to that. I know he was joking, but that was actually a real statement at that time. I've definitely been worked on.
I would say that maybe you made up for it because a few years after that, when we were working on the Easter weekend, we did the Friday night, and we were talking about the fall, and the person who ruined the good image was you, a man.
Yeah.
We didn't have a woman do it. We intentionally had a man do it.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So,
that is true. And it was it was literally me because I was the actor too. That's true.
You were.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally.
So it was literally.
You.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was this.
Look at us. We're all a work in progress.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
Even I am like, right? I, as a woman, I come from a very specific background. I come from a white, Christian background, and so I've been learning a lot from my sisters of color as they have talked about their experience, and I have learned, man, I have to take a back seat and I have to just shut up and be quiet as I listen to a number of my friends and colleagues talk about their experience in ministry, talk about their experiences as women, because there's definitely privilege that I bring to the conversation. I have massive blind spots. So even me as a woman am growing in feminism.
You guys talked about, man, there's so much. I almost feel like we need to have another one of these discussions, man. There's so much. We'll need to come around. But I want to hit these up. Two more things, and then I'll let whoever wants to have final thoughts. There was a statement in there where you talked about where the statement says all identities of gender. And I'm wondering a little bit of the backstory behind there, because it sounds like it's maybe like if there's trans women, there's kind of like there's a push to make sure that everybody recognizes trans women as well. Is that what was going on behind there, or what can y'all tell me about that?
Yeah, this was the hardest part of the statement. There was
she's like straight up Craig.
There was some women who were on the panel and or on the subcommittee that felt very strongly against this one. And this is why I think these statements are so important, because it asks us to really ask the question and ask if we believe this and if we want to draw a line in the sand, or if we're going to be we're going to continue the debate going forward, right? And so there are some women who feel that you can't be a woman unless you have a period, unless you have ovaries, unless you are usually what people would say is traditionally defined gender roles. And this committee talked about that. They explored it, sought God's guidance. And ultimately they decided, and it was, it wasn't all smooth, but they decided that trans women were women too. And that's where our church would be with that going forward. And that's why I think these statements are so important, is because it's we're always open to where the Spirit may lead after this, but for now it ends the debate. It's like, we will accept trans women at this church. And, not every person would get on board with that at the church here. I would say that they're in a minority, though. Yeah. We allow people to believe that as long as it doesn't come out as hatred. And we've made a commitment as a church to not discriminate against trans women in positions of leadership or anything else with that. But the majority of the women who are cisgender women that were on this on this subcommittee, the overwhelming majority of them were very supportive of trans women and wanted to make sure that our church was abundantly clear in the way that we welcomed trans women. And this is why, this is one of the most important parts of this topic that was important for men to get out, because men should not have any opinion on what makes someone a woman. That is not up to us to decide. Yeah. We need to have, we need to empower women that can make these decisions. We need to make sure that we respect women's decisions for how they define what womanhood is. Obviously, you need diverse thought within those groups, but that one was one that I know was one that I don't know if everybody that was on the committee would agree with that, but the overwhelming majority did.
Yeah, it's a bit of a complicated spot, but it would not have worked in your text had it not been in the prior one that we talked about last week.
Yeah, and you think about
that
was composed of queer people and myself on that statement. And as I said last episode, the reason I was on that one is because we didn't have any statements. If we did it over again, I wouldn't be on that one, but you live and learn. And this was now one where it was open to all women, and women don't all think the same, just like anytime you have a group, don't all think the same. And so that's where the statement before definitely helped push that in the direction, but it was something that was seriously considered and respectfully thought about. And we felt that, I should say the group felt, and then later approved by the elders, that God was leading us to be fully accepting toward trans women and to see them fully as women, as wonderful expressions of creation by the divine.
Mm-hmm.
This
go ahead,
sentence
sorry.
for me, no worries. This sentence for me was, I referenced it in my sermon on last August, and that to be able to stand up front in a congregation and be able to say the phrase, trans women are fully women, was just a moment of holy moly. I don't know if I could say this anywhere else, or in any other church type of setting. Like that was a very like, oh my goodness, I don't have to hide anymore what I think. I can actually be an advocate as a pastor for all women, and that was very exciting.
Yeah. Man, that's and like I said, what I love about these statements is they're really asking us, not asking us. They are strongly encouraging us and allowing us the opportunity to really shift our paradigm in what it means to be fully Christian. That's like why I love at the end of of the statements where you're saying this is allowing us to more fully honor God and each other. I love that, man, because we've got to. As one of our issues as Christians is that we're always getting comfortable. That's like a human disease, and it's very prevalent in Christianity. We just get comfortable and think that we've got it, and we just have to just toe the line. But no, man, we're always called to do new things, man. Mm-hmm. I have one other one, unless anybody's got any more thoughts on this point.
Nah, you good, bro.
Okay, all right. So one of the final statements there says, we celebrate the diversity of femininity, the positivity of all body shapes and sizes, and every woman's individuality, including her role in the body of Christ and the greater community. What was some of the thinking behind that? And how do you see that being embodied, in the life of the church after that, or since the statement has been?
Why don't I answer the first one, Mandy, and then if you want to answer the second question, I'll answer about where it came from, because I lived through it in the next room over, essentially. So that came from there's obviously a strong perception as to what a woman should be and what a woman should look like. Do you remember when Serena Williams wore the catsuit at the French Open?
Yeah,
and how people lost their minds. I mean, the tennis organizers lost their minds and changed all the dress codes because they just couldn't
handle it.
Deal with her body. I don't know what else to say.
Too much woman, man.
I know, it was just so strange. It was like, oh my gosh, she's a woman. Like, what would you think was happening before?
Right.
And I think to be able to recognize that the church actually contributes to that rather than tries to dismantle it, I think is really important. I mean, we use a lot of imagery at Paradox Church, and what kind of women do we portray in our sermons, and what pictures do we show of women? If they're all, a woman of a similar body type, then we've really failed in our ability to celebrate that all women are valuable and fearfully and wonderfully made. So a lot of women on the panel felt that the church was contributing to kind of a very narrow vision of beauty and a narrow vision of what women should look like. And it was a big ask to make sure that we were intentional in the way that we tried to talk about different standards, different ideas of beauty, and to show that it's much bigger than the narrow vision that so much of what the church has presented.
Okay.
Yeah, I love these. I don't know if you guys have ever seen illustrations of Adam and Eve, sometimes found in these in your relatives' books that came out a while ago, where Eve is like blonde and like,
it's
a little
awful.
bit like Barbie.
It's awful.
I'm always having to explain to my kids, Same for Daniel and for something like that. You're like, hey, but they don't look like this, right? And so like they're going around telling their friends, hey, they don't look like. I'm like, dang.
That's right.
Well,
man.
the hard part with that too, Icky, is there's like in Western art, there is a painting of just about every scene in the Bible, and so it's real easy to go and get it. But they're all white people, and nobody in the Bible is white. Maybe the Macedonian man. I don't know. So like it takes. I got called out on it actually pretty heavy by some people of color at our church who were like, "You've got to stop using so much white iconography." And it's hard to hear. I don't mean for that to come across, but it's so available, and you have to go on a journey to find other pictures and other paintings. Not that it's not there, it's just not, the algorithms don't present it as easily, so it takes more effort.
Right.
But we've actually had people who have come to our church and they said, when I saw a black depiction of Mary, the mother of Jesus, I knew that I was at the right church. And it was like, what? Oh, that's it? That's what we've got to do? And of course it makes sense because it all of a sudden shows that the gospel is much more than colonial Europe would have you believe.
And these pictures of some of
we getting to you, Mandy.
On the
No worries.
the keto diet, looking like anorexic.
Yeah.
We've got to move away from that, man.
Absolutely.
If you're looking for a good children's Bible with diverse pictures, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I just discovered this last week, created a children's Bible, and all of the illustrators are from different parts of the world. And so while there are some white depictions of biblical characters, there's also many of them are of many different races. You have Asian, you have Black, you have Hispanic, you have, it's kind of like the whole gamut of humanity depicted.
What's it?
Yeah,
it's just what is it called?
You just got to be intentional.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu's Children's Bible? I don't know.
Well,
Children
Google
of God,
it.
maybe?
We'll Google it. Yeah.
We'll Google it.
Yeah.
We've ordered quite a few books here at our house with better illustrations drawn out for kids, and we've got one that just tells all the women's hero stories in the Bible, and
Nice.
I love that.
Well, let's get to that second
it's
part.
though. It's important to do that.
Yes, it is super important because we need to shape our minds differently. So how have you guys seen that being embodied, at the church, or, what efforts are you guys kind of doing?
As with this statement, the body shapes and sizes is absolutely important. But also the second part of that, I think, is equally important, that every woman's individuality, including her role in the body of Christ and the greater community. I stand by this. I think the greatest weapon used against women in the church is Proverbs 31. I think that text has been used to shame women for stepping outside of the role of women, of wife, mother, or homemaker. It is, if you ask many women, not so much the newer generation, but if you talk about the Proverbs 31 woman, there's almost this like eye roll that happens, like, who can ever be that? But there's a phrase in it that I love. It's a Shet Chayil, and it basically stands for woman of valor or woman warrior. And that entire text, Proverbs 31, is really written as a warrior poem. The translator just softened the language because they thought it was too masculine and too strong for women. But what it's really talking about, these warrior women, and that same phrase is used for Ruth. It's only used one other time in the Bible, and it's used for Ruth. And it's a woman who is the total opposite of the Proverbs 31 woman. She's not married. She doesn't have children. She doesn't have a home. She doesn't have her own business. Like, she's the total opposite. And so what it's really advocating, this entire text, is just this celebration, this blessing that is supposed to be given to women for simply being women, for simply existing in their femininity as they exist, which I think is a very freeing thing. And so I think as a church, one of the things that we've been really committed to, particularly, I can speak to the youth and to the children's and to my conversations with women, is we are really anxious not to typecast women. You can be more than you can be more, or you can be different, or you can be the same as wife, mother, and homemaker. Like, all are accepted. One is not less than the other. And so, I mean, simple things of like, when I'm trying to schedule Sabbath school or trying to schedule guest speakers, like, I'm not going to reach out to the moms every time. Like, I'm not going to put the burden completely on the mothers of Paradox. Like, I'm going to reach out to the dads of Paradox. Like, that's a simple thing, because I think too often churches are like, well, it's the moms that we're going to reach out to, because that's who runs that aspect of a family's life. But that's limiting to men too. Like, get the men involved, get the dads involved. And so there's things like that. Things, the way we talk about women. I so love the way that we talk about women and share their stories from the Bible. It's this erasure of the patriarchal, depiction of women in the Bible is so important, because, again, we're reclaiming those stories. I'm very excited for Craig's sermon this coming week. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I'm saying it, Craig. Very excited about it, because it's reclaiming a story that has so often been either erased or completely changed. And so a lot of it is reclaiming stories, teaching women to reclaim their stories, teaching kids the value of humanity in all of its expressions, those kinds of things.
Yeah,
that are
absolutely.
simple but powerful.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's good. Here's a this, I don't know if God popped this into my head or what, but here's a bonus before we finish off. This was something when Craig and I had talked prior to IG Live. I remembered something that you said, and I'm just interested to see where people's thinking goes on this. And we want to put it out there for food for thought. I remember, Craig, you had said there was a discussion. I don't know how deep it got, but there was even some hesitation about Christianity, which is centered around Christ, who is a man, and that dynamic of how that may make women feel as being called Christians. I don't know if you remember that or not, but we briefly talked about that. And so I just want to know from everybody, because what it sounds to me like is there might be hesitation to give, I guess, godly devotion and worship to Jesus because he's a man, and that makes Christianity centered around men and the patriarchy and all that. So kind of get just remind me of what the concern was with that, and then I just want to know everybody's kind of what kind of thoughts start to come up in everybody's mind as you're thinking of how that would be evaluated. Not necessarily for you, Paradox, but I just thought it's an interesting point for us to get and kind of think about.
Yeah, I mean, we have people from all walks of life here at Paradox, and some people grew up in churches. Other people grew up in religions outside of that emphasize feminine spirituality more, and talk about more goddesses rather than gods. Because of that, you bring a wide diversity to the table, and they're going to ask questions that are questions that I was always told you weren't supposed to ask. So, for instance, when we talk about Christianity, maybe we should back up and talk about God, who's bigger than Jesus, because Jesus is a man, and the minute you start talking about Jesus being the incarnation, you're instantly shortchanging women. This is a question I was told to fear my whole life. Even saying that to people today in 2020, I've been told that that's a very kind of off-limits question. I think it's an important question to ask. I really do. And I would tell you that I've still found a lot of hope and resonance in the Jesus message. But this concern has a valid point, because when you look at the Bible, like I said, And for sure, 63 of the 66 books are written by men. And you have the incarnation of God, who is a man, and you have a whole history of church, which has been dominated by men. And the only thing I found that's really helpful in that is you can still believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God and, accept that. But I think it's important for every Christian to recognize that this thing is slanted toward men. And the more that we recognize that, particularly as pastors, the better pastor we're going to be, because then you realize there's importance in involving more feminine voices and involving feminine theologians, even if they're not, the main theologians people talk about through church history. You have to go looking for it more, but they're there. Yeah. How are you telling stories of women's empowerment, and particularly how they were spiritual leaders? And if you can even share a testimonial about how you had a sexist viewpoint and women changed that perspective, I think that's really what men need to hear in churches in 2020. Now, we all like to tell stories where we're the hero. I know that. It feels real good. I found, I'm smiling as I say this, but I found that my church appreciates it more when I just talk about how much I screw up in life. They just love that kind of story better. Right. But I would say that there should be a space to ask every question. And that doesn't mean that every sermon needs to have a space for every question, but there should be spaces where people can ask questions like, should we be worshiping Jesus if Jesus is a man? Because it instantly puts women at a disadvantage. And I think it's a valuable question to ask. My personal answer is yes, Jesus Christ is still the central belief of this church. But we're going to do our best to highlight feminine spirituality and do our best to try and make up for that gap as much as possible.
Bishop Mandy, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I think it's important. I don't think erasing Jesus' sex is the answer. I think it's important to recognize that the historical Jesus was man. I think that's where encompassing this full expression of divine, as full as we can through metaphors, through masculine, feminine, gender neutral metaphors is very important. I don't know. I think I very much am in line with Craig in terms of, acknowledging it, and acknowledging that, yes, that puts women at a disadvantage. And also, Jesus was radical in his acceptance of women at the time. Women funded so much of his ministry. Women traveled with him. Women were disciples. And I think too often the church has looked and seen Jesus was a man, and the 12 official disciples were men, and so therefore, men are the spiritual leaders. But Jesus' actions spoke very differently. Jesus spoke with women. Jesus first told a woman that he was a Messiah. He trusted women. He partnered with women. He advocated and celebrated women. And I think that is, we have to follow Jesus' example in that. It's a radical acceptance. And that makes people uncomfortable because it clashes with this patriarchal paradigm that we find in the Bible. But I don't think people who are reading the Bible realize that Jesus himself is clashing with the patriarchal paradigm that we find in the Bible. So I don't know.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Mandy? I just think that point alone, it needs to be broadcasted, and it needs to be emphasized on that in a very patriarchal, misogynistic text, that Jesus was so pro-women.
Right. Absolutely.
That needs to be clarified. I mean, for me, I know that being incarnate God, you have to be a sexual identity of some sort, and it makes sense in its context. I don't think there's a problem with Jesus being male, except that so much of the scripture and the text that we look at and history itself is male dominant. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be such a big problem for us.
Right.
But the way that Jesus interacts with and deals with and partners and allies with women is so starkly I don't know. It's so starkly contrast to, even if we're looking at the church fathers, the early church fathers, right? The way they talked about women. It's totally different, day and night. That's crazy to me.
And it's amazing when you say it like that. I'm just thinking that's amazing that the character of Jesus was so strong that even in such a patriarchal text, that still could come through.
I mean, who could you think of historically that were religious leaders of any time that partnered with women as much as Jesus? I can't on the top of my head.
Well, the whole resurrection message, Icky, is dependent on men being willing to believe women, because only women were at the resurrection and
the gravesite.
And I think that's one of the most masterful moves of the resurrection, in the fact that, yes, Jesus Christ was a man, but the message of resurrection was carried and trusted toward women. And if men ever believe in Christianity, the fundamental premise is that you have to start by listening and believing women.
Hey.
I love that.
In all of the Gospels, the one person who made the most amount of converts was a woman in Samaria.
There you go.
I mean, you know,
A village, an entire village.
An
entire village, yo.
Another woman.
Fish and bread from little kids.
Right. Another woman whose story is often retold through patriarchal lens. We love to claim like she was a prostitute, she was a loose woman, but not the case. Like, she doesn't have the power to divorce men in that time.
Right.
She's a slave in essence. She's a sex slave, is my understanding. Yeah, property. And so, just another, and Jesus saw past all of that. Jesus saw her for who she was, which was a person, a human who he could partner with. He didn't see her as property. And I love that. I think that's just brilliant.
He approaches her and he doesn't tell her what to do. He asks her for water.
Yeah.
He takes the vulnerable position, right?
Ooh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, any final thoughts as we close up here, guys and girls and
I love women.
Y'all.
Y'all?
Y'all.
Everyone?
You know, I used to have an associate pastor who now I think is joined a satanic cult. His name's Derek Cruz. I don't know if you guys know him. And we were sitting around one day a couple
Shout out
years
to you,
ago,
Derek.
he said to me, he said, yeah, shout out to Derek Cruz. He said to me, you know, this is how we know we've got issues with masculinity. He says, you know, we always say, hey, what's up, guys, when we come in the room. He said, but if I ever came in and I said to a bunch of guys, hey, what's up, girls, they'd all be mad at me.
Right. It's true.
Interesting. We could say, hey, guys, but if you said, hey, girls, that'd be a problem.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's true. Girls is too often used as an insult for men, and I think that's problematic.
Problematic.
Yeah.
Deal with this stuff.
Yes.
All right. Any final thoughts,
Let's
pastors?
give Mandy the final thought.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm down
man,
for
so
that.
much
I'm down for
pressure.
that. Mandy be dropping them jewels.
Man.
Don't hurt us, Mandy. Don't hurt us.
I think that if we are truly, here's my final thought. If we are truly to call ourselves Christians, if we are truly to live the Jesus way, it means that we have to be listening to the voices so often oppressed, so often ignored, and so often tainted by society. And one of those people groups is women. We are incomplete. We are not actually practicing Christianity if we are completely negating the voice of women. We are an image of God, our practices of Christianity, all of it is just not there. It falls short unless we are embracing, celebrating, and uplifting and following and listening to women. I think that's there's my final thought.